I find out through a friend that knew the chief in Brooklyn North, and he said that once they got word of what happened and why I was being sent there, they were like, listen, we have enough problems in Brooklyn. He's a Manhattan problem. You guys deal with him, meaning me. So then when they had to figure out where to put me, the detective worked in the 10th, which, well, he was in homicide at that time, but Manhattan South homicide. So like, we have to send him to Manhattan North. Where do we put him? Where is the worst place we could possibly put him? So they put me in a 3-2. It was actually a great place for me because my father in the fire department worked at Engine 59 and Ladder 30, which is on 133rd and Lenox Avenue. And I pretty much grew up in that firehouse. Like I knew everyone there. So I was like, wow, that's great. At least I'm over there. And this is 1995 now. So when they first put me back to full duty, and the firemen were great. I was like royalty because my father was just retiring. I think he put in for his terminal leave. And I was there and they just rolled out the red carpet for me. Matter of fact, it was so funny. I went on my first fire job there and I'm going up in the building and I got my coat and, and then I see this fireman come stomping up the stairs smoking a cigarette. And, these guys have been through the mill over there. Yep. And I recognize him as this guy, Bobby Brown. So I was like, hey, Bobby. And he's looking at me like, and then he looks at my name tag. I said, I'm John Murray's son. He goes, get the hell out of here. Like, come to the house. And then, he's telling everyone who I am and, kicking in for the meal. And, he says, you come here, you get any foot posts nearby, you come with us and hang out with us. So it was just nice to be amongst friends, but I get to the 3-2 and I walk in and they assigned me to the 124 room. That's where all the reports are taken, typing up reports and stuff. So I'm in the 124 room and then two cops walk in. These were the two of the biggest cops that I've ever seen, Darryl Love and Angel Blasini, and they were partners. So they come walking in and think about it. I don't know how much time I had on the job at that time, 8-9 years. I get transferred to the 3-2. They're thinking, what's the deal with this? Am I an undercover? Am I IAB or whatever? So they walk in and they're like, what are you doing here? So I'm like, I'm typing reports, like I didn't know what they were looking at. So he's like, no, we want to know what you're doing here. So now I'm starting to get their drift, but I'm being sarcastic. And I'm like, right now doing a 61 for a robbery. I'm doing, I'm being sarcastic back to them. So they confront me again, the two of them. And I say, you know what I'm doing here? I had a fight with a detective who used to be a cop here named Tony Petrak. And, I knocked him out and now I'm here. So they look at each other and then the angel sticks his hand out. He goes, welcome aboard. We hated that guy. So it was just, it was amazing. So, but yeah, I got sent up there and I have to tell you, with all the adversity, I had to stay one step ahead of them. They were constantly trying to do me in. It was the cops, the people, my friends who supported me, barring none. That was the way that I survived this whole thing. The boxing team, Lee Pachter was the coach of the boxing team. I leaned on him so many times. The CEO of the 3-2, this is how bad it was. I'm in the 3-2 and I was about to get that plea that Bruce Cutler was talking about. And the ICO comes to me. The ICO is the Integrity Control Officer. The ICO comes to me. He was a good guy and knew about my situation. And he says, look, I'm just giving you a heads up. Eddie Cannon was the CEO. He ended up being the chief on the job. But he's a prior rapist and, an ex-drunk that now was his, he was so arrogant and looked down on everyone else. But in any event, so he started coming after me, retaliating against me. And so now the lieutenant comes to me and says, look, Cannon knows you're going to get this plea you're going to be on. So the plea was 60 days suspended and then a year's probation. He says, you're never going to make probation. He told me I have to paper you up. And that's essentially code for just bombard me with violations, all kinds of violations. And then they go to the department advocate and say, look, he's on probation, terminate him. That was their plan. And he knew it and didn't want to do it because he knew I was a good guy. So thankfully, and then he lets me know and I call Lee. And so we came up with this thing. Trust me, I was going through and I had so much stress at the time, plus all of this and knowing this. So Lee is like, look, how are you feeling? How are you doing? My son was just born. It was 95. And I was going through all this stress. He goes, let me take your guns. I'm going to put you on restricted duty and get you the hell out. So I called up the CEO of the medical division where I worked when I got arrested, and he loved me. And I said to him, I said, Cap, if I was to be on restricted, would you take me back over there? He goes, absolutely. When are you expecting to go on restricted? I said, very soon. So I ended up turning in my guns. I gave them to Lee, and they brought me to health services, and I met with a psychologist. And then part of the interim order 9, when an officer is under stress and wants to be removed from patrol, they have to remove them. So I escaped that disaster, went over to the medical division. But that was my career. I was constantly being hunted this whole time. So that's why when I got to the point of I won the trial, I felt vindicated. 2 juries now, the grand jury and a civil jury, have said, decided with me that I was justified in the actions I took. So at that point, I had enough, I didn't know what camp people were in. It's funny, while I'm at the medical division, a nurse who I became friendly with there, she came over to me, she says, I have a funny story to tell you. I said, what? So she says, I have this friend, her and her husband was on the job as well, but she has this friend who got out on 3/4, and him and his wife, they were friendly, so they would have dinner together. So she went to his house with her husband, to meet him and his wife, and they're having dinner. And he says to her, he goes, you work with that guy, Joe Murray? And now, she doesn't know, is he a friend of the detective? Is he a friend of mine? Like who? So she's like, yeah. And he's like, what kind of guy is he? So she's like, well, he's a quiet guy, but he seems like a good guy. Just being tentative. She doesn't know who he is or what camp he's in. So he says, wait right here. And he runs out of the room and he comes back in with a deck of cards. He used to be a cop in the 3-2. And at one time in the 3-2, on payday, we all used to get together. We had the precinct club, and you had food and beers, and you played cards. So they were playing cards, and this detective was at the card game, and he won like 12 hands in a row until they finally counted the cards, and there were 2 aces missing. He was holding aces on them, but nobody did anything. They kicked him out of the club. I mean, I would have knocked him out right there, but they were a little intimidated by him, so nobody really confronted him. But after I had this fight with him, so many people were coming up to me, like my friend Lee, who worked in the 3-2. He didn't know about that. He says, Joe, you're not going to believe the people coming over to me that they're saying, tell your guy, Joe Murray, we owe him dinner for doing what we should have did years ago. Like that's the kind of guy this guy was. Sure. And then that nurse, coming to me, and the guy still had the deck of cards, that from that card game. They were so, they hated the guy. So
doesn't sound like the kind of guy you'd want to have a meal with. Does not sound like the kind of guy you'd want to have a meal with, for sure. I mean, but there's people like that, unfortunately, in every job, and it just makes the job look bad. So I'm glad that he's not on the job anymore. But I was thinking about this, I'm a huge Law and Order fan, right? And I don't know if you remember when Mike Logan at the end of season 5 punches out the politician, he gets banned to Staten Island. And this story, it's kind of different, obviously, for what happened to you. But this is like the real life Mike Logan story right here. You know,
you know what it also taught me, Mike, because you do a lot of cops and firemen stuff. Mm-hmm. My father at the time, just before I had my fight, he was, because I had my thing in 93, he retired in 95, but he was injured. And they sent him down to the medical office, downtown Manhattan, because he was in Harlem for years. And they sent him down there because when you're injured, you're on light duty, you're in the medical office. And while he was there, he said, this is before I had a problem, but I was in the 7th precinct, so I would go up and see him. And he was telling me, he goes, I'm having a problem with the firemen here. And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, this guy, he's just so arrogant. He's got a chip on his shoulder. It's his firehouse, the other guy. And my father's just there as a guest because he's injured. So he's got the broom and he's like ordering him around. Meanwhile, this guy's got like 7 years on the job. My father's got over 20 on, and he's ordering him around and, being demeaning to him. So he goes, I'm going to have to teach this guy a lesson. My father's older. So I was like, Dad, let me come see this guy, and he didn't want me to do anything. But when I came to visit him, he goes, I'll point him out to you, but please don't say anything. I said, I just want to see who this guy is, like what kind of guy would do that? So I met the guy, and it was funny because he was selling his car, and he had his car in the firehouse. And so I went into the firehouse just to, introduce myself and say, I understand you have a car for sale. So we just started talking. I wanted him to, just talk to me a little bit and know that this was my father, like, leave him alone. So it's funny. And then he calls me in to go into the lounge, and on the door of the lounge is newspaper articles about robberies in the subway. So I'm looking at it, and I'm in plain clothes. He doesn't know I'm a cop. So I said, what's this all about? He goes, you're not a cop, are you? So he starts off and he says, these transit cops, they come in here, they use our lounge. Meanwhile, people are getting robbed in the subway. So he goes, you're not a cop, are you? I'm like, yeah, I am. I said, so we can't take a meal, as cops, and, what are you trying to say here? And it was just so offensive. But this is the kind of guy he was. He didn't even care. My father was a senior man on the job. Like, he just had this chip on his shoulder. He had his chip on his shoulder about my father, and then also about these cops, these transit cops, they use their lounge. So it was funny because shortly after that, my father calls me up and he says, yeah, I confronted him. I said, what happened? He goes, well, I was pushing the broom. I was doing something. He was like trying to order me around. I said, look, I had enough of you. And then he got in my face. And he goes, and I punched him. I hit him right in the nose. His nose is bleeding. I said, what happened? He goes, he ran up to the captain and reported me to the captain. Another thing that never happens in the fire department, but just to show you what kind of guy he is. So the captain calls them both into the office, and he says, all right, we have to split you guys up. And, it was like, what's the holiday squad? Oh, it's a chart, whatever. He goes, Murray, you're in the holiday squad and you go to this squad. Like, that's how the fire department dealt with stuff like that, So shortly after that, I have my thing. Similar circumstance,
right?
Except he had a broken jaw, and this is how the police department reacts. They lock me up. They put me through the system. They're trying to bury me. He says, I told you to take this job. You see the difference? So it was just, incredible. It was so incredible, the things that happened to me during this process. And it was so circular. Today I work with Bruce Cutler. He's semi-retired, but when he gets a case, he calls me up and we work the case together. Like, I do all the court appearances and doing the motions, and so it's just so funny. The prosecutor who prosecuted me ran for district attorney in Nassau County, and I met him at a party later on, like 20 years later. I hadn't seen him, and it was a friend of mine who was being installed as the president of the Retired Detectives Association. So he goes, I want you to be there. We were good friends from when I came on the job, Midtown North. So he goes, you sit at my table. I have a table right next to the dais. So I'm at the dais and I'm, saying hi to everyone and talking to people. And I look across the table. I see the prosecutor that prosecuted me. And I'm like, is this a joke? Like, what, he's inviting me here. So I approach him later and I'm talking to him. And I said, I don't know if you remember me, but he stopped me midstream. He goes, I know exactly who you are. Matter of fact, he rattles off the story, chapter and verse, 20 years later. So I'm like, how the heck do you remember all those details? He goes, you know why? Because after that case, no detective would work with me. They thought I threw the case. Meanwhile, I just presented it to the grand jury, So he ended up getting transferred to the Rackets Bureau, and it was just incredible. And we just got friendly. He's like, so what are you doing? Oh, I became a lawyer. He goes, yeah, I heard you became a lawyer. So I said, I just picked up this big case. It was a $400 million Ponzi scheme, and there's an SEC action. I was trying to get the criminal part of it. I was talking to the client who really liked me. I said, but I lost it to some firm, Meyer Swazi was the firm. So I was like, what are you doing now? He goes, I work at Meyer Swazi. That was my case. So I was like, first you try to indict me, then you steal my case. It was just so funny. So we got to be very friendly. And then he ran for district attorney in Nassau County. And I was working on his, team. They were challenging signatures. So, he needed an attorney to help him. I was just a volunteer, but nobody really knew our relationship. They just assumed I was a Manhattan cop. We knew each other from the Manhattan DA's office. But what a great guy, a super guy. His integrity was impeccable. He presented this fairly. I thought he was a little too aggressive because he was going after me for my boxing. He was telling the grand jury, like in the grand jury, questioning me. He goes, you're a boxer. You fight all the time. You get hit in the face how many times? He goes, so why did you have to do this? Why couldn't you have slipped and slipped the punch away or backed away? I said, look, he threw a punch at me. I didn't know who he was. And I just reacted and I threw a punch back at him. So I thought he was very aggressive in the grand jury, but fair, and that's why I really liked him. And I thought he had a lot of integrity. So I had no problem supporting him when he ran for district attorney. And then some years later, I run for district attorney, in Queens County. And this is the Cinderella story, like I went from a violent felony offender assaulting a police officer charged, and they were really looking to hurt me. And then I fought back and I become an attorney myself. And then I run for district attorney. I was like, what? Can you imagine if I win this thing, and I become the DA of Queens County? Like, what a redemption story of coming back from, the brink. I was like, wow. But everything that happened in my life up to that point prepared me for that job. I felt I was the most prepared person, the best suited person for that job, having been a police officer and also having been arrested, put through the system. I saw it firsthand live up front, what the criminal justice system had, the defects and, things I didn't like. I'm the perfect guy to come to office and, you talk about criminal justice reform. I don't know too many people that had my experience that can talk about reforms, So it's just amazing,
I think it's still a Cinderella story. I honestly,
yeah, it is.
I think it is. I think it absolutely is, even without the victory in 2019, just because of where you are now. And it's crazy, I'm hearing you tell this story. This is a show that started, for my listeners that really, really, really know me. This is a show that started, the name of it will tell you, because I used to call WFAN and get yelled at by Mike Francesa all the time. And here we are a number of years later having conversations like this. I could have never imagined it. We get to talk to people like Joe Murray. We get to talk to so many other great guests that we've had on. And I'm just in awe. Honestly, I love listening to it. I don't want to do too much talking just because of look at this. I mean, it starts off literally from the bottom to as they say, the cream rises to the top. I do want to ask you about one more thing, and I don't want to keep it too long because I really enjoyed talking with you. And I'll get to the concluding segment in a moment. But Conor, I'll set the stage and then you take it away. Conor McGregor, who just bended his his leg into a pretzel recently, he went crazy, for lack of a better way to put it, in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center in 2019. He throws a dolly into a bus, injures a few people. And you were you had to litigate against him. So for those that don't remember it, there was a UFC event at Brooklyn a number of years ago. Conor was embroiled in a rivalry with the since retired Khabib Nurmagomedov. And Khabib was on the bus because he was going to fight somebody that weekend. I think it was actually Ally Quinta, who's a Long Island guy. And Conor and his entourage roll up and like a bunch of hooligans just start attacking the bus. Would I say that to Conor's face? No. But that being said, you being the litigator against him, take me through that.
Oh, yeah, it's incredible. It's just part of the amazing things that happened with me during this whole process and the people I meet. And like I said, how circular, my boxing days, it's so funny. Ally Quinta's coach, Ray Longo, was training me at a certain point in my career, my amateur career, in early 90s. I ended up moving to Long Island, and I started training with him. And he was partners at the time with this guy, Mike Ryan, a former Navy SEAL. He was a kickboxing champ. And I would spar with him all the time. So I'm working out with Ray. This is just so funny. I'll get back to Conor McGregor real quick. I just want to tell you that the crazy connections that I have with this is, so I'm training with Ray, and I fought in 3 Golden Glove tournaments, like 3 years I fought. I made it to the quarterfinals twice, and then I fought a stablemate of mine, Jason Gathers, and I lost to him in the preliminary. So, but I loved it. And then in '95, I fought Monty Barrett in the finals of the Metros. And at that time, Ray Longo was training me. And Monty Barrett was knocking everyone out. He was on fire. He ended up turning pro after that in '96. He went on, had an amazing career, 18 years. He had 2 belts, fought for the world title twice and lost. But he was the only guy to knock David Tua down, and he beat Tua. So he was just such a tough guy. But I was very close with Ray Longo, and even like during my amateur career, I was at a fight at the Westbury Music Hall, and I forget who it was. Witherspoon or somebody was the main event, and his opponent bailed out. So they got into the ring, and they made an announcement. Is there any licensed fighter, heavyweight, who wants to fight and whatever? And I was like dying to do it. I wasn't even licensed yet, but I was about to turn pro. And Ray was at the fight, and then he saw me, and he was like, oh my God. He goes, oh my God, if you were going to go up there, I was going to be like, yeah, let's go. So it was just so funny that the connection, and he's training Ally Quinta. And then I had some other friends that, mutual friends of Mike Chiesa, and Mike Chiesa, being from Washington, wanted to hire somebody here locally who was part of the game and knew the fight game and knew some of the players. But the interesting story there is Ally Quinta was not the scheduled opponent for Khabib. Matter of fact, there was a succession of people that was substituted in and out. And, right before the fight, I think it was Max Holloway, who the commission said, no, you can't fight. Because
it was supposed to be, not to cut you off, it was supposed to originally be Tony Ferguson.
Ferguson.
And then it was Holloway. Holloway was going to step in, and Holloway couldn't do it because of what you just said. So Ally Quinta was literally like the backup to the backup.
Yeah. But Mike Chiesa should have gotten that fight were it not for him cutting his face, because he couldn't fight that night. And were it not for him cutting his face, he would have been picked to fight Khabib. So he suffered immense damages, getting a title shot. I mean, having been a fighter myself on a so much smaller level, but that doesn't mean I wasn't doing the push-ups and hitting the bag and sparring and preparing just as hard as anyone else. You get a shot at the title. That is so valuable. And it's so rare, because they only fight a couple times a year. And look at Conor McGregor now. This guy is the biggest name in the UFC. He hasn't been able to get another title shot, So there's a lot of value to that. So anyway, I just loved it that Mike entrusted me through our mutual friends to handle this case for him. He's such a classy guy. He's a great guy. He's actually fighting. He's fighting August 7th out in Houston. I'm flying out to go to the fight with him, and he's just such a great guy. So that's a wonderful case. I love doing it. I love litigating it. It's unfortunate what happened to Conor. I mean, that's devastating to suffer an injury like that. I don't know. I was a fan, and it's sad to, watch him, just devolve from who he was, even, all these allegations that are put forth. He punched that guy in the bar in Ireland. Like, he's doing like crazy stuff, and it's so unfortunate, but, I don't want to go into the details of the case. I'm so fortunate and thankful to Mike for trusting me to handle this matter for him. And I look forward to a very favorable outcome.
We'll see. And so that brings us, and I've had such a blast talking to you, and I'm really glad that you came on. I want to get now to the concluding segment. It is now time for rapid fire. It is 5 hit and run questions, and from me and 5 answers from you. Are you ready?
I am ready, sir.
All right. So first, you kind of talked about it, but favorite boss you ever had while on the job?
Favorite boss? Wow. The best boss that I ever had, I have to say, is John Doyle. And John Doyle tragically took his own life last year. John and I were on the boxing team together. John is just such a great guy, sharp guy, smart guy. Remember I talked about Billy Sharkey growing up around Billy and working out with Billy? Billy moved to Pennsylvania, and John lived in Pennsylvania. And he trained with Billy Sharkey. How weird is that of a coincidence? Then through our careers, we get on the boxing team. He transfers to the 115 where I ended up in my career. And, he picks me as his driver. So he was my partner and my boss. So while we're working together, he knows they're gunning for me. The CO over there, Chris Jameson, was the inspector, and he didn't like me. And of course, he's following orders to go after me. And this is to tell you who John is. They went to him and told him they wanted to give me a below standard evaluation. And he was like, no, I'm not doing it. He goes, he's a good cop. He makes a lot of calls. We made a lot of calls together because we were partners. And John was a street cop. He was a street crime cop, very sharp, made a lot of arrests, got promoted. He was in ESU, and, just really talented guy and an amazing boxer. So I'm working with John, and he refused to do it. He actually told him, man, you just don't do that, in this department, because now you're the target. But he wouldn't do it. And then I got suspended anyway by this CO for something else, and I got transferred. And it was a couple of months later that the ICO from the 115 comes to me to serve me with my evaluation. And I'm like, what's this? He goes, well, I did your evaluation. And I was like, well, why didn't my sergeant do my evaluation? Like, well, this is what the CO wanted. And it was like, it had a lot of negative marks in it. And, I went on to appeal it. So John, after the fact, he was a fighter and a great fighter. We started, Brian Daly, who was the captain of the team, he started this, we call it the 40 and over fight club at the Westbury boxing gym out in Nassau. And we all got together, every Saturday, working out together, former pros. Scotty Lopek, great fighter. We used to train together in the amateurs. He would come down there, and John was always down there. We'd be sparring together. Like, it should be called the 50 and over fight club because we're all over 50. But I'm sorry, Mike, I know it's the rapid fire.
No, I don't care. It's fine.
But I had to do justice to him because he was the epitome of the best boss you can have. He was my best partner because we were very active and we made arrests on the street, and I never had to worry about him. And he had such a sense of humor. You know, it was funny because, you know, we'd run into people and they'd be like, take that gun and badge off. And then he had this way of looking, and he would look over at me like this, you know, with an eye, like, we're two killers. Like, you want to fight us? You know, so it was just so funny. And through all the nonsense that I went through, having him was just so valuable to me at that point in my career. And it was not long after that I left. You know, I left the job, you know, because people like him are a rare breed, and they come few and far between. And it's the tragic loss that we lost him, and especially the way we did lose him. So I had to honor him with that.
I have no problem with that. And for anybody that may be struggling out there, especially after the last year of the pandemic, please reach out. You're not alone. I know it may sound cliche-ish, but it's true. Reach out to those around you. Do not be afraid to ask for help, you know, because you have people that love you. You have people that care for you. Pete Pranzo and I talked about this when he was on the show. Please, there are people that want you to make it to another day. So always reach out.
It's so important. I thank you for that. And I do have officers who contact me because they know my story, and you know, a lot of the officers that contact me are in a similar situation that I was in. They're having, you know, I think it was 94 or 93. We had another epidemic of suicides at that time, and they sent us all to early intervention to be interviewed. All the guys that were on modified, who were restricted because of cases, and all the guys that I worked with at the sick desk were arrested for one thing or another. So they sent us all down there. And I remember, like, what they were saying is, you know, the three biggest things were family problems, job problems, and money problems. And I could check all three of those. You know, like I was in, you know, going through a divorce and custody and, you know, all kinds of job troubles and financial problems. So, you know, I myself, you know, as I told you, I surrendered my firearms, and I was having such a hard time constantly under fire, and not physical fire, but being attacked again and again and again, that I, you know, just out of fear that I might snap one day and do something or hurt someone or hurt myself, I ended up going to a doctor to see someone and seek treatment. And there was always the stigma, like, it's a sign of weakness and you shouldn't do it and it'll destroy your career. And I have to say, you know, very happily, that I went so far as I checked myself into a hospital at one point because I just did not feel good. And I spent a week in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it was incredible. It was just like the movie. I couldn't believe it. But I did. I went in there and I got evaluated. I got tested, and I was taught, you know, some tools to help myself through crisis situations. I learned a lot. It was very helpful. They tried to retire me on a psych disability, and I fought it. I went through a traumatic series of events. I recovered, and I felt, you know, that I was capable of fighting. So I had a great doctor who came to the medical board, fought for me, explained my condition. She was with me the whole time, whole treatment time, and I won. And they restored me back to full duty with a firearm. So that stigma that used to be there is not there so much, you know, and I can't say they'll do that in every case, but I was able to demonstrate, you know, my recovery and competency, and, you know, that entrusted them to believe that I was, you know, capable of carrying a firearm. And I did. I went on and continued my career. And like I said, I worked with John. We were very active. But I'm telling this story to tell people you can get help. You can get treatment. You will have to surrender your firearms. You may need even to go on medication. but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And if you have a problem, call me. And I do. I have a number of people that, you know, I can't identify them, but they're active members who call me. They're in similar situations, and, you know, I am there, and nobody will fight harder to get you back to full duty if that's what you want and is it in your best interest. So I love that you're doing that and putting that out there, but I wanted to add to that,
Please,
that people should do it. I'm a living proof of it. Not only did I recover and go back to work full duty, but then I retired and I went, because I had to worry about that with the bar. You know, I had disclosed that when I had to go to character and fitness, to my competency to be an attorney, like that was an issue. I had to disclose it. And they had no problem with that. I've gone on with my life. I've, you know, achieved success on several different levels, and you can recover. It kills me to see, and people close to me, like I said, John, you know, I have so much guilt in me because we would talk, and I knew he was going through some stuff, and, you know, I should have done more, you know, but I wish it has to be the individual to know that we're here, come out, ask for help, we'll help you, you know, and there's no reason not to anymore, because we can fight to protect you in your career and all your interests, you know. So thank you, Mike.
No problem. And I'm glad you added that. And there was just a special on Channel 2. I don't know if you saw it. Cindy Shu, the longtime anchor at CBS 2, was talking about her own mental health struggles and spent an hour or so opening up about that. So, I mean, even take it from me, I've never thought about anything of harming myself. But, you know, for my listeners, if you know me well, you know, I mentioned this before. I used to get bullied a lot in middle school. I went through a lot with that. And I had some dark days, man. But I was able to fight through it because I knew that people loved me. And when I was in my darkest moments, in my darkest hours, I reached out. So, you know, and look at me, even though I didn't go through half of what Joe went through, not even a quarter of it, we've both been in our own difficult situations. Bullying's not a fun thing to go through either. Joe went through it to an extent. So reach out, because people love you. People love you. So second, favorite boxer you ever watched?
Oh, what was the question?
Favorite boxer you ever watched?
Oh, I love Mike Tyson, hands down. Matter of fact, when I got sent to the 3-2, I would look for him. I would look for him. I was like, you know, the delusions of grandeur that, you know, maybe he would not like cops and want to fight me, you know, and I'd fight him in the street, and, you know, but I loved him. I thought he was incredible. I had a similar style. Like, I was just blessed with heavy hands, and I would knock people out. And, you know, when I saw what he was doing in his career, and I was like, everyone told me I couldn't do that. They're like, you're not going to knock everyone out. You can't just, you know, and they're right. You know, obviously I lost a lot of fights that I shouldn't have lost, but I felt like vindicated watching Mike Tyson, you know, doing what he was doing, and, you know, just going after people. He would chop them down like a tree, and I just love them, you know.
Charles Barkley told a great story. I don't know if you ever heard it, that he was going to go watch Mike in Atlantic City with his friends. I think this is when Charles was playing for Philadelphia. And they're fighting over who's going to go get the food. Who's going to go get the popcorn, this, that, the other. So Charles leaves to go get the popcorn. They finally settle on it being him. The fight starts while he's gone. He comes back, fight's over. Must have lasted like 30 seconds. You know, that Mike in his prime, before he did himself in, unfortunately, with some out of the ring decisions. Yeah. Mike in his prime was something to see. And even after he came back, just go watch his comeback fight against Pete McNeely in 95. Third, if you would have joined the fire department, besides the firehouse that your father was in, what company would you have liked to work in?
Oh, I would have been an active house. That was a very active house. So not just because my father was there, I would have picked that house even if he wasn't there. You know, ladder 30, the closeness amongst the firemen just to begin with. And I'm talking about anything. Like, my car broke down, and I called my father for a ride to pick me up or whatever. And he sent a fireman over there with a box of tools, and he fixed my car. I don't know this guy, but because I was the son of a fellow firefighter, that's what they do, you know. And it's more police too, but in the working houses, the heavier houses, that's where the closeness is even stronger. So barring my father working there, I would have picked that house anyway. It was just such a busy house to begin with. And they were just such great people, the softball team and like all the stuff they did. I would have loved it, you know, being there. And plus fighting with them. I fought and traveled with them, different fights. And matter of fact, I went in 93, just before my arrest in August of 93, because I got arrested September 9th, 93. I was in Colorado Springs fighting in the World Police Fire Games. And for whatever reason, there was some disarray in our team and nobody else was going. And I wanted to go. So I went myself. And for my fight, I hooked up with the firemen. And Manny Fernandez was the coach. He was a captain, retired captain, was the coach of their team. And he worked my corner, and as did, I'm not sure if it was Signorelli, but another one of the fighters on their team worked my corner. You know, like these guys are just great guys. And I just love being around cops and firemen. You know, they're just great people.
I love chronicling them too. You know, I that's why I have two miniseries here, The Best of the Bravest. You know, I got Tales from the Boom Room, and I got just the regular, not the regular, I don't want to put it that way, it's extraordinary folks, but even just people that weren't in a specialized squad, on patrol, you know, detectives in certain squads. It's a lot of fun. I get an extra joy out of it. So fourth, second to last question, favorite bar or restaurant in New York City?
You know, I have a couple, but one of my favorites was Forlini's, and it's on back. I think it's like 93 or 96 Baxter Street, right behind the courthouse. And I started my career, like I said, in Midtown North, making a lot of arrests. And what we would do is we'd go over to Central Booking, lodge a prisoner, and then you'd get online an e-cab in the DA's office, which is across the street. And, you know, a lot of times we would just, you know, leave your, you know, information there and then run back to the bar, and we'd all hang out at Forlini's and we'd eat. And, you know, it was a great place because it was filled with cops and you knew everyone there. It was just such a fun place to, and we're all on the clock too, you know, and then you run back over, you do some escorts. Like we used to have 24-hour court. So that was a great place, you know, historically. And I still go there as a lawyer, and I meet with, you know, I invite my clients there, and I, you know, other lawyers that I work with, and a whiskey tavern down the road there. But there's a place, Walker's on Walker Street, a little further west. Great place. My dear friend Mike Sheehan, who passed away sadly before I ran for district attorney. Mike's a retired detective. He was, you know, in a lot of movies and on TV, and he was the crime reporter for Fox for like 20 years. We became very close, and he was doing all of my private investigations. So we spent a lot of time together, and that was one of his favorite places because he lived in Tribeca, and it was, you know, down the road from him. So I still, when I walk in there, all I think about is Mike, because that was his, you know, his haunt. And sorry.
No, I said his spot at the end of it.
Yeah.
It's, there's always, that's the one thing I don't know when, but I'll be heading to New York City soon with a retired bomb squad friend of mine to have a lunch. And that's the thing that I mentioned to him off the air, that's the thing I miss most about the city. Even though living in Connecticut, I got family in the city. I said this before on the show, I could just hop on the Amtrak and head on down. It's the cuisine. It's my favorite place to visit. I don't know if I want to live there, especially with the prices and the crime these days, but I do love visiting New York City for many things, but the cuisine tops the list. So the fifth and final question of the rapid fire, having gone through what you've gone through in your life, what advice would you give a young cop coming on the job now?
You know, it's sad because my daughter took the NYPD test. She's 23. She has the same public service wanting to help, and you know, she took the NYPD Nassau and Suffolk. She got 95 on the Suffolk test. She's so excited about that. But the NYPD was the first to call her, and at the time she was in Adelphi University. She was so close to getting her BSN, and she really wanted to kind of follow in my footsteps and join the NYPD. Sadly, she chose not to, but I'm happy about that. She's now working at North Shore University in Manhasset in the cardiac unit. And then, you know, sarcastically, Dad, when you have a heart attack, make sure you come here. Tell them to, you know, but I gotta say, to the cops coming on the job, I applaud them for having, you know, it's such an honorable profession that you would put your life in jeopardy to help somebody else. And I love the people that I met and worked with. Like I told you, like very, very last thing, I'm retired since '02, and I'm still close with a lot of people I work with. Tragically, we lost John. But I would just tell the cops today, do your job, act in good faith, do your job, but have my card on you, because it's crazy what's happening today. They're under attack from all sides, from the street, from the department, from, the left, the right, everybody is against them, and I would just tell them, we need you out there, but, be careful. God help you, be careful, because today there are assassinating police officers today. It's just incredible. And I love that I'm able to give back and help police officers on the job today because of what they do. We need them. We need them out there. This whole nonsense about defunding and disbanding, it's nonsense. And people are starting to wake up to that. So I support them 100%. Trust your instincts. There's that little voice. There's that little voice that tells you, be careful here, watch out for that. Trust it, and be careful. That would be my advice. And thank you for that question. That's important.
And on that note, that concludes what's been really a great conversation that I'm glad I was able to have with Joe Murray. I do I want to send a special thank you to Bill Cannon and Mark DeMeo, because when I brought this show back in November after a 2-year hiatus to finish college and do some other things, I could have never imagined the growth that the show has had in such a short amount of time. The reason that I'm talking with Joe, the reason I was able to talk to Irma, Scott Wagner, Chief Animal, and Bill Ryan, the reason the Bomb Squad miniseries has started, the door doesn't open if not for Bill and Mark. And they have a great show in Police Off the Cuff. Joe is on there frequently. And I really am just marvel at what this show has become and the kind of people that we're able to talk to. And so I want to say a big thank you to them. Joe has a law firm that he runs. He is the head honcho there. And I'll share the screen here. If you are in any kind of trouble, do not call anybody else. Call Joseph W. Murray, Esquire. He may be located out in Great Neck, New York, but he'll help anybody in the New York area. You see the telephone number if you're watching on YouTube. And if not, if you're listening, I'll read it off to you. 646-838-1712. That is, again, 646-838-1702. Or you can email Joe at joe@jmurray-law.com. And he will help out anybody at any time. So just give him a call. And I'll link his information in the description of this episode, both on YouTube and everywhere else that you get your podcast. Joe, is there anything else you'd like to contribute?
I love that you brought up Irma Rivera. There's so much that I could still talk to you about, but I have to tell you, the people that you've had on the show, I love them. Irma, tragically, Mike passed away, but I also used Irma as a private investigator. I cannot tell you the incredible work that she's done for me in my cases. And, her skill set, I didn't know her, work with her on the job, but watching what she's done. I'll just give an example. I had a sex offender case that I had, and I was like, oh, Irma Rivera, she's the expert at this. And I believed this guy, and I thought he was innocent and just wrongfully accused. She had him less than an hour confessing to the whole thing. And my jaw hit the floor, how she did it, got his confidence, working with him, talking to him, and, with me right next to him. I'm right next to the guy, and he's lied to me this whole time. And I'm like, yeah, this guy, I kind of believe him. Just to see the skill set. And you know where that comes from? Not taking anything away from Irma and guys like Mike and, Bill and all these guys. But when you think about the time that we spent on the job in the 80s and 90s, where there's over 2,000 homicides, hundreds of thousands of violent crimes taking place, you're never going to see that. Hopefully we never see that again. But that kind of experience on the job, seeing every different possible, homicide, and you're working with such professionals. I don't think the cops today would ever be able to acquire the amount of investigations and experience that these guys, Bill Cannon, Irma Vera, have. So their skill set is just it's so incredible. For me as a lawyer working with him and a former officer, marveling at what they do and how well they do it. So God, and I tip my hat to you, Mike, for doing what you do on this show. I love what you're doing, bringing all these people. I enjoy the firemen too, so keep doing what you're doing. I love it. And I'll always be a fan.
Thank you so much. And I'm a fan of yours, and I'm really glad you're here. I'll promote myself real quick, and then we'll get out of here. If you want to find me on social media, Twitter at Mike in New Haven, which of course is my old WFAN call-in name, Mike in New Haven on Twitter. On Instagram, original_MC1. LinkedIn, Mike Colón. Just type in Mike Colón, MIC''D, because there's a lot of different Mike Colóns out there. So if you type in Mike Colón, MIC''D, you'll find me, and I'd be happy to connect with you. If you have any sports-related inquiries regarding the podcast and guest, business line 917-727-0891. Email colononsports, COLON on sports @gmail.com. If you have any other podcast-related inquiries, not regarding sports, you can hit me up at 917-781-6189. And we're the Colón Report, THECOLON report @gmail.com. We are everywhere that you get your podcast, and we're also on YouTube, MC's Audio, MC''S Audio. Coming up on the Mike and New podcast tomorrow, Tuesday, where I'm recording this on a Monday. Tuesday, I will be interviewing, getting back into the sports aspect of the podcast. He was on ESPN for many years as a panelist on the classic show, The Sports Reporters. He is a legendary writer for the Boston Globe. Bob Ryan will join the show Tuesday. And of course, next week on the Mike Dream podcast, continuing with the law enforcement theme, Tales from the Boom Room. Profiles of the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad continues. Retired bomb squad detective Jim Carano next Monday. Next Tuesday, retired emergency service sergeant John Lampkin. So looking forward to those 3 interviews, and looking forward to posting the content everywhere that you get your podcast, and of course on YouTube. All that being considered and said, on behalf of Joe Murray, I am Mike Colón. We will see you next time. Take care, everyone.